Successful leaders don't wait for the perfect conditions. They create the conditions that they need. They forge order out of chaos through consistent, intentional actions that build momentum over time. What feels chaotic for you right now? Is it a team that's struggling to gel or a strategy that's not translating into result? Whatever it is, you have more power to influence it than you realize. Welcome. You're listening to This Leader, the podcast. If you lead people and are seeking the transformational, high-impact secrets that will lead to greater joy and fulfillment in your work, will optimize your team performance, and will help you create a happy, highly productive workplace, then you are this leader and you're in the right place. I'm your host, Claire Laughlin, and each week my guests and I will explore the mindsets, techniques, and actionable strategies that will help you build the career, team, and organization of your dreams. Because I believe no one should have to suffer in a dysfunctional workplace. Let's get started. Hi there. Welcome to This Leader. This week, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to share two unique situations that I encounter fairly frequently. They're very common, and you've probably faced something like this, or you will face something like this as a leader, right? Because that's how my work always begins. Someone calls me with a challenge, and then we work together to design a way forward. So this is just going to be like a free consultation. And if either of these scenarios sounds familiar, I promise you it's just a coincidence. I've put these together using examples that I've encountered over the years. Also, I'm going to get very practical about how to move forward. So, if you're facing something like this, then this episode should be particularly helpful. So, maybe grab a paper and pen or something to write with, okay? So, I'm going to share the basics of each situation first, and then we'll go into each story a little deeper, one at a time, and I'll give you some practical frameworks and tools for how to address each. Okay, the first challenge is this. A leader called me, and I'm going to call her Julie. And Julie said that she's been recently hired to lead a team of about 12 people. But here's the thing. These folks haven't had stable leadership for quite some time. There's been a few false starts recently, and things have deteriorated on the team a bit with a lack of leadership. Some team members are at odds with each other, and trust has broken down. And so Julie, the new leader, is faced with some team members who don't work well together, and gossip and rumors have started to take hold. And there's been some blame and finger pointing. And so enough general dysfunction that it's getting in the way of progress and it's making her job much more difficult. Second challenge was from a city manager. Let's say this is a city manager role. And the council has completed a new strategic plan with his participation, of course. In the past, these strategic plans have been executed in silos with different directors owning isolated parts of the plan. But this time, the city manager, we're going to call him David today. David wants to bring the leadership team together to work in a more collaborative manner so that there's less rework, less wasted resources, and more interdependence. Well, I'm calling this a city manager role. It actually could be any kind of executive role who's working with a strategic plan, maybe with a board, anything like that. So at first glance, these two situations might seem rather unrelated. But I bring them together in this episode because as I looked carefully at how to approach each of them, we can see ultimately they're both about the same thing. And that's how to bring people together and create order out of what feels like a bit of chaos. Or maybe we should just say it's sort of like herding cats, right? It's getting people who are all going in different directions or doing things differently to move together to bring a shared vision to life. Whether that's a shared team culture, in Julie's case, or a shared commitment to a specific set of results and timelines, like in David's case. So we've all been there, right? Like in those circumstances, like Julie, where we've had to lead people who probably haven't chosen us. And we step in and we have to foster relationships and become the leader. I used to facilitate a county-wide partnership between about 30 agencies.
including workforce development agencies and educational partners and healthcare organizations. And I was working with CEOs and presidents and teachers and analysts from all types of organizations. Many of them, might even call themselves direct competitors of each other, and bring them together, build relationships, and get them to trust me and each other. So we had to become a team. Then let's take you back to David's kind of a situation where we need to get people to buy in and execute against a plan. That can feel very disruptive for folks because it's like you're saying, hey, I know you've got other things on your mind, but I need you to stop what you're doing and do this now. And that can be an uncomfortable place for a leader, especially if the people you're overseeing are doing a good job and you don't want to be too disruptive. Anyway, I've been there too. In that same partnership I just mentioned, I was leading projects with people from all different organizations and departments within those organizations, and I had zero formal authority. And I had to get people to come along and get energized toward a shared goal and make progress together. And of course, I didn't do this alone, but I spent about 10 years being, that behind the scenes facilitative leader of people who had plenty of other things on their plates. So even that one partnership experience, I had both of these kinds of situations emerge. One where I had to lead people toward a shared culture, and the other where I had to lead people toward shared outcomes, right? So these experiences taught me a lot about influence and collaboration and getting work done. Again, these experiences of my own, in addition to coming alongside many organizational leaders doing the same thing, has taught me that we always have to pay attention to at least three things. And this is going to be behind the scenes or informing everything we do moving forward. So there's the purpose behind what we're doing. We've got to understand the why and be able to speak to it with energy and passion. We have to be able to ignite other people's interests and sort of steal their focus, so to speak, right? With the compelling purpose. The second thing is the people that we're asking to come alongside us. Who are they? What are their interests and needs? And where is our common ground? Really important stuff. And finally, there's using a process that'll help us get there. And that's our focus for today. We're going to talk about a process-based approach to addressing each of these situations. The first about bringing a team together and building a shared positive culture. And the second about bringing people's execution focus together to get things done. Okay. Although the purpose and the people side is always embedded. So, one more comment. If you're experiencing some degree of chaos, so to speak, this isn't a character flaw or a sign of failure. It's a natural occurrence. And it is the natural result of growth or change or inherited circumstances. The beautiful thing here is that there are proven ways to create that order and alignment and momentum, even in the messiest situations. So today, I want to share both of these situations because I guarantee, like I said earlier, you will face or have faced something similar. And by the end of this episode, I'd like you to have a clearer roadmap for transforming those experiences of chaos into clarity. Let's start with question one. How do I unite a fractured team after leadership turmoil? So, the scenario, let me set the stage here. Again, we're going to call this leader Julie, and she's just stepped into a director role with a 12-person team that's been through multiple leadership changes. There's one employee who applied for her job and didn't get it. So that employee is showing some resistance. And people are working in silos. Despite everyone being generally more or less nice to each other on the surface, there's underlying dysfunction and disconnection. So basically, Julie asked me this: how do I bring this group together? So first, let's explore why this happens. The situation is challenging for a leader, but it's really quite normal. So research shows that between 40 and 70% of leadership transitions fail within the first 18 months, often because new leaders underestimate the impact of the inherited team dynamics. Okay, so this may be why there was leadership changeover prior to Julie coming into this role. But when teams experience leadership instability, They develop what psychologists call learned helplessness, right? They stop investing emotionally in shared goals because experience has taught them that everything's going to change again soon. So I'm going to just sort of turn to my own work, get it done, stop collaborating so much, stop thinking of new things, right? And maybe you've heard of this Tuckman's classic team model, which is forming, storming, norming, and performing. You might have heard those words, tells us that every team goes through those stages. Forming, first they form, then they storm. There's some conflict that happens. Eventually they norm. Hopefully, they norm into a good place where they have stable patterns. And then they really can start to perform. There's a fifth phase called adjourning that is sometimes included. But here's what most people don't realize. Teams that have experienced leadership turmoil often get stuck in this sort of perpetual storming, right? Or you might say that they norm, but dysfunctionally, right? And with continual changes in leadership or team composition, they really never reach the trust and alignment needed for high performance. So that's where we're going to take this one. So let's talk about the path forward because Julie, if you're out there, anybody who's relating to Julie, there is hope. First, be intentional about creating a positive team culture and know that you are not actually starting from zero. You're really starting with people who want stability and direction. They're not resistant to leadership, they're actually resistant to more chaos. So you're going to need to show them that you are that stable leader that they can count on. Really important. So, your first 90 days as a new leader are really critical, 90 days more or less. So, here's your roadmap. Phase one, listen and observe. This is your first month, days 1 to 30 or so. Just get to know your people and see how they see things. You could schedule one on one conversations with each team member. Ask broad questions like what's working well about this team and what could be better? What are your strengths and what would you like to see change? Questions like that can be just open ended, broad, appreciative questions. Don't go down the questioning line of like, who's wrong or who's messing this up? None of that. Just ask really broad, positive, open ended questions, right? And don't make any promises. Just listen. You're gathering intelligence about the real dynamics, not just the surface level nice behavior. Now, for that resistant employee, the one who wanted your job but didn't get it, approach the situation with curiosity and compassion, not defensiveness. Often, a person's resistance can mask their disappointment or their fear. So be direct and say, I know you were interested in this role, and that can feel disappointing not to get it. But how can I make sure your talents and aspirations are recognized and developed? Okay. Sometimes that resistance melts when people feel seen and valued. In phase two, like your second month, I want you to co create a new team direction. This is where you start building shared ownership over that team culture. It's so important. I want you to bring the team together and say something like this like, okay, I've heard from all of you individually. Now I want to create something together. Our team's operating principles. You can call these guidelines, you can call them norms, whatever you like. Don't just impose a set of principles or your values on the team. Instead, I want you to bring the team together and facilitate conversation about what matters most to them, about how they work together. So, here's a few key questions I like to ask. First, I'd like to tap into their previous positive experiences by saying something like this. Hey, think about a time when you were part of a really high functioning team. It could be any time in your life. It doesn't have to even be work related. Think about a time, this team where trust was strong and you worked well together to get great results. What was that team like? What did that team do? And what did they not do that helped them establish and maintain trust and really get results? Okay. Now, this is a great discussion because it helps you see what your team members are sort of subtly expecting from a team given their past experiences. And that one question, what did the team do and not do? Have them write those things down. If you can capture this on the flip chart, even break into smaller groups for deeper discussion and then share the highlights, that can be really powerful. After you collect that, then you ask, what would make this the team that you're proud to be part of? Okay. What behaviors would you like to be able to expect from others and rely on from your fellow team members? You'll also want to remind them that they will also be accountable to these behaviors. Once you build a list of those behaviors, you're going to work together to boil those down to a few key agreements or guidelines. Less is more here, especially at first. You want a short list of the most critical behaviors that are going to make the biggest difference right now, preferably things you can see whenever possible. So instead of something like, high trust teams trust each other, you'll push your group to make those behaviors observable. Something more observable than that would be, on the best teams, we ask questions instead of assuming. So, just for your information, this isn't always the case. Some that are more about beliefs or mindsets can be helpful. For example, I love the norm, which is assume positive intent, because that's a general principle that asks people to examine their own thinking and assumptions. And that one can be very powerful. And then if you have one-on-ones with your people, you can say, hey, are you assuming positive intent? Or let's assume positive intent here and tell a better story. So the information you gather in this phase and the norms you establish are really critical because this lays the groundwork for what team members should expect from one another and what you can expect from them. And then what you can hold them accountable for later in terms of performance. And this is important if your team fails to come alongside in this effort. Okay. So we'll have more of that conversation at another time. By the way, this conversation should be a group session for sure. So all team members can hear each other and talk through the expectations. And I advise setting aside about 3 hours for this conversation if possible, so you can dig deep and arrive at the right kind of a list. Bring food, keep it positive and forward looking, and ask them about their best experiences together. You can even ask a question, throw a question in there like this. Tell me about a time when you guys worked really well together. What was that like? You know, depending on how dysfunctional your team has become, you may not get a good answer to that. So there you have it. Keep it positive. Get folks out of the office for this conversation if possible. Now, phase 3, your third month, your focus is going to be on establishing new patterns. In this phase, you're going to measure, reinforce, and implement the norms that you've co created together. And this is where consistency becomes your superpower. Keep your promises. Make sure you are emulating every one of the agreements and bring those team norms out in every team meeting. Remind people of it, post it on the wall, catch people doing something right and call it out so that people learn to recognize those positive team norms in action. Bring a little positive attention to these behaviors and communicate regularly with your team. Make decisions transparently. This is huge for trust building. Show them that your leadership isn't going anywhere. The beautiful thing about this approach, you're not just building a team, you're healing wounds from past leadership instability, and you're proving that investment in this team will pay off. Hi there. I am so excited to share this episode with you today because we have been at this podcasting thing for many months now, and this is quickly becoming one of my favorite ways to communicate with you, my fellow leaders. But I got to ask you something. Can you help me grow this podcast? If you haven't done so yet, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts. And share this with a friend. Your referrals are always appreciated, and it's a great way to grow our reach. If you like what we're doing here, leave me a comment and a 5-star review. That will help us get noticed and get the word out. And as always, if you have suggestions or topics you'd like me to cover, send me an email at support@clairelaughlin.com. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. All right, my friends, let's move on to question 2. This is David's situation, which is essentially, how do I move from managing individuals to leading unified execution? So remember the scenario. David's a city manager and his city has a strategic plan, but execution in the past has been sort of scattered, meaning he finds himself managing 8 different people doing 8 different things. And he'd like to develop a more shared momentum toward their bigger. So David told me everyone's busy and they're getting things done, but it's hard to make progress on what matters most. So David, or any of you that can relate to David, here's the news. You're facing one of the most common challenges that any leader will face. There's a very popular book called The Balanced Scorecard. It tells us that up to 90% of organizations fail to execute their strategies successfully. The top reason? What they call the strategy to execution gap or gaps. Essentially, strategy exists on paper, but the daily activities don't align with strategic priorities. Does that sound familiar to anyone? I know it does to me. So here's what happens. Without a clear focus, a sense of urgency, and a unified direction where people feel responsible to one another for getting things done on a shared timeline, teams will default to managing their own individual tasks rather than driving those collective outcomes. And this is not because people don't care. It's because the human brain craves clarity. And when we don't have it at the team level, we'll create it at the individual level. Plus, think about it. We can control the things that are within our purview, and daily urgency takes precedence over vague goals. So we need to create team clarity and a sense of collective urgency. The breakthrough for a leader in David's situation is recognizing that you need to make a fundamental shift. You, like the leader, needs to make a fundamental shift from managing individual performance to leading collective outcomes. And this isn't just a mindset change. It requires different processes, systems, and approaches. So here's the path forward. First, you want to create brutal clarity on priorities. You're going to gather your team and answer this question together. If we could only accomplish 3 significant things this year that would make our strategic plan successful, what would they be? Notice I said 3, not 13. Research on cognitive load tells us that teams can realistically focus on no more than about 3 to 5 major initiatives while maintaining their day-to-day operations. So we still have the everyday stuff to do, right? Don't forget about that. So you're going to create that brutal clarity on priorities. Second, you're going to implement short execution cycles. I want you to think sprints, not marathons. Here's where the magic happens. An annual goal is a long time. We will lose sight of that because we always think that there's more time to get something done. So you need to break those annual goals into timeframes like 90-day challenges and 30-day sprints. Okay, so that's like the quarter, a quarterly goal, a monthly goal, for example. So why quarterly? Why 90 days? Well, it's long enough to accomplish meaningful work, but short enough to maintain urgency and focus. And then adding those shorter 30-day focus lengths, time slots really increases energy. It's like, okay, folks, what are we accomplishing this month with respect to our goal? It increases energy and it helps us be realistic about what can be accomplished, which is actually usually more than you think when our efforts are focused and compounded. Okay? We can accomplish a lot in a month if we just focus on the right things. So the secret is this. At the beginning of each 90-day cycle, the team commits to specific outcomes, not just activities, but actual results that they'll deliver. This creates what psychologists call a temporal motivation, which is the closer a deadline feels, the more motivated we become. But 90 days is manageable and 30 days gives us energy. It doesn't feel overwhelming like a full year. It doesn't feel out of sight like a year might. But I really, again, I'm just going to reiterate this because I really like to support any quarterly goal or 90-day outcome, let's say, with 30-day deliverables. So you break your strategic plan down together into these shared milestones. Now, not everyone will contribute to every milestone probably, but you can have sort of sub teams and cross-functional teams working together. Step 3 is about building collective accountability. So instead of individual performance reviews, you're going to implement weekly team check-ins where everyone reports on their contribution to this month's deliverables. I personally like to have this on a screen where all of the deliverables are in a spreadsheet and we can highlight them and we can see visually who's responsible for what, because that just adds a little bit of accountability pressure. Okay. So this is going to shift the conversation from, one to one, like how is Sarah doing on her goals, to how are we progressing toward our shared goal? And how can we support each other to ensure that we get there? It also, a little bit, like I said, gives that personal accountability. It helps us guard against the dreaded surprise of getting close to the 90-day mark and discovering that someone suddenly is behind schedule, you know, that they thought they were on schedule all the time, but something has come up. The 30-day windows and weekly meetings really should bump up everyone's sense of their accountability to the collective success. And that's what we want. So, the beautiful thing about this, people naturally will start collaborating because their success becomes interdependent. Silos start breaking down organically because everyone realizes they need each other to succeed. And there's energy because you have a shared purpose. Okay. So, step 4, celebrate your collective wins. At the end of each 30 and 90-day cycle, celebrate what you accomplished together. This builds momentum and reinforces the shift from individual contributors to a unified team. If you're facing a challenge like this one, like David, here's what you'll discover. When people start seeing clear progress toward meaningful goals, energy increases exponentially. Those 8 different people doing 8 different things will transform into one team driving shared outcomes. And that's when the real magic happens. So here's what I want you to remember from today. If you're feeling a bit of chaos on your team, either from people not working very well together because you don't have a shared positive team culture, or from not working together toward energizing shared goals, I want you to remember that chaos isn't permanent and it's not a reflection of your leadership capabilities. Whether you're inheriting a fractured team or trying to align scattered execution, the path forward exists and it's more achievable than you might think. Both situations require the same fundamental shift, moving from managing chaos to creating intentional order together. So for Julie, that meant building trust and shared ownership. And for David, it meant shifting from individual management to collective leadership. But here's the thread that connects both. Successful leaders don't wait for the perfect conditions. They create the conditions that they need. They forge order out of chaos through consistent, intentional actions that build momentum over time. So let me ask you this. What feels chaotic for you right now? Is it a team that's struggling to gel or a strategy that's not translating into result? Whatever it is, you have more power to influence it than you realize. Start with one small step this week, okay? I want you to try something. Have that first listening conversation. Identify your 3 most critical priorities. And then facilitate a discussion about team norms or bring people together to look at how to break the goals down. The path forward begins with the decision that you'll make to stop surviving in this chaos and start leading your team through it. You can do this. Before we wrap up for today, just remember that these situations are common, much more common than you might think. And if you've got a challenge you'd like me to address, I'd love for you to share. Come on over to my website, clairelaughlin.com/podcast. It's the podcast page. And if you scroll down, you'll find a link where you can submit an idea for an episode. I would love to hear from you. And meanwhile, if you try either of these strategies or you're somewhere in the midst of these with your team, reach out and let me know how it's going. You can always send me a message on LinkedIn or Instagram. I'm at Claire Laughlin Consulting, or send me an email to support@clairelaughlin.com. I always love to hear from you. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. And until next week, go lead the way. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. To learn more about my services and for lots of free resources and additional tools to enrich your journey, visit my website and subscribe to my newsletter at clairelaughlin.com. If you have a question about leadership, teams, or organizational culture you'd like me to address on the podcast, please reach out to me at support@clairelaughlin.com and connect with me on social channels at Claire Laughlin Consulting. Until next time, lead the way.